Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'll be trying to show you a complete repertoire based on the move 1e4. This has been my starting move for all my games, and I find it very effective. And I'll try not to bog it down with lots of theory and keep it very simple. We'll go for simple setups and simple ideas. The backbone of this repertoire is the Italian game, which starts after 1e5. 2 knight f3, knight c6, then bishop c4. This is what we'll be looking at the most. But of course, black has other options on move 1 and on move 2. Of course, he can go knight f6 here or d6. So I'll try to look at all of these and provide you with an easy way to get a good position against them. Against 1e4, there are many options other than 1e5, as I said. I'll try to show them. We have the Sicilian defense, which is 1c5, the French defense, 1e6, the Qg4 defense, 1c6. These are the four main options. But other than those four, you also have g6, the modern defense, d6, the brick defense, knight f6, the Alekhines defense, knight c6, the Nimzowitsch defense, which will transpose sometimes, but and it's not that popular, but I still think it's important to know what to do against it. And there's 1b6, the Owen's defense. Any other move by black on move 1 will usually transpose to one of these openings. So first, we'll look at 1e5. So we'll go knight f3, and we have black has two options. Sometimes I do play the King's Gambit, but for normal player, the King's Gambit, you will have to sometimes be down material, and will have to face tough positions, and it can be very tough for someone who likes quieter positions. So I feel like the Italian game, which comes after knight f3 and knight c6, is a very calm way of playing, but is also somewhat aggressive. First, we'll look at alternatives for black on move 2. So first, we'll look at the Petrov defense, where black is basically saying, you take my pawn, I'll take your pawn. So we will accept the offer and take his pawn. And now the classical way to play the Petrov is go d6. We'll move our knight back, and he takes our pawn. And then if we play d4, he'll play d5. This was one of the main weapons of Fabiano Caruana at the World Championship a few years ago. But I've seen a lot online. People like to go for this move, knight c6, which is called the Stafford Gambit. And many people have trouble facing it. But I think I found a simple solution. You take the knight, he takes, and now our move is f3 here, which basically stops all play for black. Bishop c4 is most likely played here. But afterwards, we can simply do a systematic setup with knight c3. Sometimes we'll play g3, d3, first we'll play the bishop out to c4, then afterwards d3, bishop f4, queen d2, and castle, queenside. And this setup pretty much stops all counterplay for black. One idea he might just it's good to be aware of is this. As let's say after bishop c4, bishop c5 we play knight c3. Is this idea knight h5, which is basically threatening queen h5, which is why we play g3 now. And as I said, this stops all counterplay for black, and we'll be able to get a good position with the pawn up. So that was the Stafford Gambit, but the classical way to play the Petrov is with 3d6. We move our knight back. He takes the pawn. d4, d5, and now I think our best way to play this is with this move with bishop d3. followed up by bishop f4, sometimes bishop g5 if your opponent's bishop comes to d6, or will even might develop the bishop to e3 if either of those moves aren't possible. We will play knight d2 and c3. And while this might look a bit boring because all these the pieces will be exchanged on this open file here, we will still have ideas, especially if black castles queenside. We can easily pawn storm him after the c3 move. But in case you don't like that option, my alternative for you is to go knight c3. Afterwards, go bishop e3, bishop e2, queen d2, and then castle kingside, and then start a kingside pawn storm against the castle king. Both of these ideas have served me well against the Petrov, and I hope they work for you too. The most played move here, of course, is knight c6, which is defending the pawn. And we will go bishop c4. Now black has two options here, bishop c5 or knight f6. There are also other very dubious options, such as h6 and d6. Now I'll cover those after we cover bishop c5 and knight f6. So after bishop c5, which is the draw piano, we will castle here. The most popular way to play this is to go c3 and then d4, or c3 and then d3. But your opponent is usually going to be prepared for that, and there's a lot of theory involving those lines. You could also play the Evans Gambit, which is b4, but sometimes if black knows what he's doing, you can easily be in a worse position. This is why I castle, and we'll wait for black to make one more move. And of course, now black has two options. The main one is knight f6, and now we will play d4. This is known as a max lang attack, and it is a very tricky option, and it provides us great attacking chances. And even if black plays the most accurate moves, we will still have the great advantage, and the bishop. We will still have a good position and the bishop pair, and we might be down a pawn in some lines, but we will get great counterplay on either the king side and sometimes the queen side. Now black has to respond. If the bishop moves back, then we can simply take this pawn, winning a pawn. So he has to take, and now he has three ways to take: e takes, bishop takes, and knight takes. We will look at all of them. We'll start off with the worst option for black, which is knight takes, and simply here we'll take this pawn, putting more pressure on this f7 square. Black usually castles, and we'll go bishop d3, pinning this knight to the bishop. Now if anything else, we can simply win this bishop, or if black tries to counterattack in any way, we can always take on the square. And while you might think bishop and a knight are worth more than a rook and a pawn, remember that in most of these cases we'll win this knight as well, and that will put us up in material. So the best way to play this is queen e7, and which puts pressure on this knight. So bishop takes d4 here, and bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, and now black's only option to continue the game in a good manner without being down too much material is c5, which strikes the queen immediately. And queen c if queen c3, then after d6 and knight f3, black can win this pawn here. And while it might look like we are down a piece, we are up a piece. This is the only option that gives black a lot of counterplay. But as I said, this knight takes e4 line is losing by force, and I think this is the best option for black. Based on what I analyzed, anything else we will just be up a piece where black has no counterplay at all. So that covers the knight f6 line. Next thing we'll look at is bishop takes. And bishop takes is probably the most solid option for black. We will simply take with the knight, and after he takes with his knight, in case of pawn takes, this is usually worse because of e5, and now this knight has to move somewhere. And most of the times, this line will have a very similar ideas to the e takes d5 line, which you'll see later. So knight takes b4, and we'll strike at the center. We're playing f4. Black's only best option is to play d6. And now we have at this position we have the bishop pair, and we'll easily get quick development. Let's look at a quick sample line. F takes e5, d takes e5, knight c3, black castles, bishop g5, and as you can see, we are already putting a lot of pressure on this knight. Black has to play c6 now to stop this knight d4. Sorry, has to stop the knight d4 move. And while black does have a knight in the center, it's not really doing much there, and we can have a very good play from here on out. So the last option and the most critical line is taking with the pawn, and this is where we get our real max line attack and the most of our fun. We'll play e5 at this point, attacking the knight, and now this knight has to move somewhere, or the knight is under pressure here, and most people will move it somewhere, and the only good square to move it though is to move it to g4. Any other square immediately puts black in a losing position because he will lose the knight, or something worse. For example, if he moves it to e4, queen e2 traps the knight, and it has nowhere to go. If d5 or even f5, we can always take en passant and put the knight under pressure, and there's no good way to defend it. If knight h5, we can just simply play knight g4, which is a very common idea when the knight moves somewhere. And if knight takes c5, we can simply take this knight, and if he takes our bishop, of course, we have checkmate and won. So knight h5 isn't really an option either. There isn't really anything black can do. The computer already shows this as +4 for white. If knight d4, we can simply take. And some people sometimes play knight g8. We will play knight g5 and knight h6, protecting this pawn. At this point, we can play knight e4, putting more pressure on this bishop, forcing it to move. And once the bishop moves back to b6, bishop d5 is simply crushing because this queen is trapped, and you have to go knight e7 to protect it. After which queen h5 leads to a devastating attack on the king side with all sorts of tricks like bishop takes h6 and a very good attack. So back here, e takes e5. Now the only option for black, other than knight g4, is d5. First, we'll finish looking at the knight moves with knight g4. There's a very now in black we have two options really. There's a more complicated option with bishop f4, but that has a lot of lines that are somewhat critical for white. So I think h3 is a very nice alternative. After knight g takes c5, knight takes c5, we can pin this knight to the king, And after, let's say he castles, we can simply play f4. And now, sorry, we don't have to play f4 now. Sorry, if he doesn't castle, we'll play f4. And when he does castle, we can simply take this knight, being up we can be being up a piece for 2 pawns, but in reality, this pawn is going to fall sometime soon, and we're going to get a great attack on the weakened king side. Now, the most critical continuation is d5, and we could take en passant, but I think it's better just to take this knight, and this is what I discussed in one of my other videos, which I'll put the link to in the description. Of course, he has to take our bishop. We'll play rook e1 check, which is a very nice line, and it involves lots of traps. Now, there are 2 moves here for black. Bishop e6 and king f7. We'll first start by looking at bishop f6 because it's a more natural continuation. We'll play knight g5, and as I've said before, there's a nice trap. As I've said before in my previous videos, there's a nice trap here. If he takes this pawn, we can take the bishop. He takes our knight. We can check the king and fork both the king and the bishop, winning the piece. So of course, he can't take. And now he has to defend this pawn in some way, otherwise we win our pawn back with great counterplay, with great play. And so the only way to really defend this piece is to go queen d5. If let's say queen d7, then in that case we can use pretty much the same trick that we used before and win the piece again. If queen d6, which does protect the bishop, then in that case we can simply take rook. We can simply take this pawn, and after he plays his rook to g8, we can take this bishop, and it's a exchange sacrifice. After f takes e6, queen h5 check, and once the king moves, he can move anywhere. King d7 is the best move because it connects both rooks. Knight e4 forks both the queen and the bishop, and it will usually win one of the pieces. We also have ideas like queen takes h7, and we are threatening to queen this pawn. So thus, queen d5 is the only option for black to defend this bishop. Now we have a very nice idea with knight c3, attacking the queen. If he takes, then we can play queen takes d5, and since the bishop is pinned, he cannot defend the queen. So after knight d5, queen has to move to f4. We can simply play knight e4 here, and this position is somewhat complex, but it provides great attacking chances, especially for white. And if he castles, for example, we can simply take, and after rook h8, we can simply take the bishop. Let's say he takes with the pawn. We can take his other bishop. He takes, and we can win this pawn. And we have regained our material. We are in fact up. The only threats we'll have to worry about are these rooks doubling up on the queen side, on the king side, which is something we have to be careful about. But we will have a great position at this point, and great play on both sides of the board. So as I've said, if black takes with the knight, we can play knight takes e5, followed by bishop e3. If he takes with the bishop, we can play knight takes d4, followed up by f4. And if he plays pawn takes d4, he can play e5, and then if the knight moves anywhere, he'll usually lose the knight or something worse. So he has to play d5 afterwards, in which case we will have a nice way to get a quick advantage. Before we move on to another first move by black, I would just want to take a quick moment to look at the filigree defense, which is d6. And if we play d4 at this point, if we play d4 at this point, there's a lot of theory associated with that move. So I think bishop c4 is a very nice alternative, which is um, uh, basically basically just putting black under pressure, and we'll just develop our pieces normally. And if knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, um, bishop c5. Sorry, if anything other than bishop c5, let's say knight f6, we can still castle. And in case of and in if bishop c5, we simply transpose. And if he takes the pawn, we play knight c3, takes, and we will have a nice attack on the king side again. And this position is somewhat like the Stafford Gambit, but we have a safer king at this point, and already we have two developed pieces, and I feel that this is we have greater chances. As I said, there are two dubious moves here, d6 and h6. And both of these moves are well met with d4. At this point, after he takes d4, we take on the knight, and we have lots of space. And if, let's say, knight f6, we simply defend the pawn. And what we'll try to do here is usually play bishop e3, queen d2, and go for some kingside pawn storm, which is a common recurring theme, and it's very easy to do every single time. You just have to be careful that your opponent will also pawn storm you. So you will just have to keep your king safe, and remember to watch for your opponent's threats before you make your own. Again, with same thing with h6. d4 again meets it well, and we'll use the same ideas we used last time. And yeah, we'll go back to our starting position with 1e4. And now black, the second most popular option is the Sicilian defense. And now I think I have a very interesting idea I read about somewhere. We can play knight c3, and now let's say knight c6. Don't worry, I'm not gonna recommend the Grand Prix attack. We can play this is a very setup like opening. We can play b3 now, and so let's say knight f6. Sorry, d3. I know we're trapping in our own bishop, but this bishop is very helpful in keeping our position very solid. Let's say g6 here. If he's a dragon player, he'll usually play a line like this: bishop b2, bishop g7, queen d2. And the idea is to do something like we would do against d6 or h6 in the Italian game. Prepare a nice kingside pawn storm. The idea of this bishop here, even though it's trapped, is to keep an eye on these pawns, and in case any part of our position falters, it will usually be there to keep it very solid. This line all works out well, and Magnus Carlsen himself has used it, and had great success with it. It also can take your opponent out of book and confuse them, especially if they're expecting the traditional open Sicilian. The next defense we will look at is the French defense, which is a very solid option. And we'll play d4, d5, and now I really didn't want to give some crazy gambit. And the advanced variation usually is extremely difficult to play, especially if black knows what they're doing, because his pieces can easily gang up on our d4 pawn and take it down. The exchange variation I felt is just too boring for both sides. And as a French player myself, it's very easy to deal with, and just frankly quite annoying because it takes out all the fun. The Tarash variation also is quite easy to deal with as black because most moves are good and there isn't really any bad move against it. So I feel the best way to put black under pressure is knight c3. And before you think that there's a lot of theory associated with the line, I think I have a simple alternative to memorizing all the main theory. Now black has three options. D takes e4, bishop e4, the winner, and knight f6, classical. I've for some reason also see some people do this dubious gambit, c5, which is called the Marshall variation. But unlike the Marshall attack on the Ruy Lopez, this doesn't offer any good play for black. We simply take. He takes. We simply take the c-pawn, and after he takes his with his bishop, he can play check. You want to get this bishop out first because sometimes our queen will retreat to e2. Knight c6, and we simply c a pawn, take a pawn. So c5, I've seen it, but it's especially by people who are more prepared for their Tarrasch variation than the classical way of playing it. So, but just remember that it just loses a pawn. Now we'll first look at bishop e4, the winner. Now the main line is to go e5, and that has a humongous sort of theory associated with it. Just to show you, e5, c5, 8, sorry about that. E4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop e4. Now e5, c5, a3, b takes c3, b takes c3, b takes c3, knight e7, queen g4, queen c7, takes, and as you can see here, there have been nearly 2,000 games played in this line, and it while the record is very good for black, very good for white, your opponent will usually be prepared for this, and you will have more experience playing this position than you do, and it can be very difficult to play this, as it is very imbalanced and is complicated. So I think the better alternative for us, rather than playing e5, is to play the delayed exchange variation. And while you might think this is just a ripoff of the regular exchange variation, the idea is that this bishop is misplaced on b4. It will have to take an extra tempo to go to d6, and we'll play a very harmonious setup here. Let's say knight f6 here. Sorry, white's turn. Bishop b3, knight f6. Now we'll play knight e2 to stop him from taking on taking this knight and doubling our pawns. Let's say knight c6 here, developing his pawn. You'll play bishop e3 to defend this pawn in case he takes. And now we can play queen d2 and castle either side. Both sides are perfectly fine. Just remember that if your opponent castles the opposite side as you, you will most likely have to deal with the pawn storm. And taking with the queen is not that much better. It's just might throw the inexperienced player off, but we can simply get quick development and be perfectly fine. The next variation we'll look at is the classical variation. After knight c3, knight f6. And the idea behind this variation is similar to the advanced variation, just build up as much pressure on the square. The main line is bishop d5 here, as you can see. But e5 is the second most popular move, and it's what we are going to play. knight d7 is the best square. There is really no square for the knight. Any other square just retreats, it just loses a tempo. So after knight d7, instead of going for the main line, which is f4, which has a humongous sort of theory associated with it, we'll play knight c2, which just defends this pawn in a very solid way. Again, this bishop is trapped in, but we will have we will usually get it out later. Let's say c5, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, queen b6, um, a3. Now we're just preparing to go b4 and challenge this pawn. C takes d4, c takes d4, and now we're perfectly fine. If f6 we can just simply take, and after he takes, yes, we do have an isolated pawn, but we have it's very well protected. We can fianchetto shadow this bishop here, get a very good position. Sometimes if black has a nerve to castle kingside, you will simply pawn storm him and be in a very good shape. So here black's last option is to play the Rubinstein variation, and this is far the easiest to deal with it. We just simply take this pawn, develop our pieces to f3, d3, sometimes e3 or f4, queen d2, castle kingside, and be perfectly fine. There isn't really much else I can say. It's both sides, just it's very simple position, and the thing is, unlike the exchange variation, we will have a small advantage throughout the game unless we make a mistake in any part of it. We just make a huge mistake. So that was the French defense. And the next, fourth main option for black is the caro. I feel the best way to deal with this without memorizing too much theory in the, let's say, advanced variation, is just to play the two knights, knight c3, d5, knight f3. Now black has three options: bishop g4, bishop g4, d takes c4, and d5. And again, we keep a small advantage throughout this, and we'll be perfectly fine. Bishop d4 is the most critical variation because it just challenges this knight and prepares to maybe take and then get play e6 and create a sort of impenetrable fortress. So we will deal with it with h3. And now if black moves his bishop back, we simply play g4 first. And after the bishop moves back again, we'll take this pawn. After he takes back, we play check. We check him. And now as you can see, if knight c6, for example, knight e6, knight e5, and we can keep putting pressure on this knight. Rook c8, after rook c8, we can play d4 and solidify our knight in the center, and we'll be in very good shape here. So with the back here, the best option for black is to take this knight. The best option for us for black after h3 is to take this knight, stopping that counterplay. Queen takes, and now he'll take our pawn. We take his pawn, and now he plays e6, and this is somewhat of a fortress because this pawn stop any counterplay along these squares, and he does have a dark squared bishop which can come to d6 and control these squares. So everything will be very tight, but we will have more control of the center with d4 later on, and better development. So after knight f3, the next option for black is to play d takes e4. We can play knight takes e4, and if knight f6, we can simply take, doubling his pawns, and get good development. Sometimes black will try playing this in a Rubinstein style variation, which is, as I talked about in the French defense, somewhat solid, but we will have a very we'll have better control of the center with knight d7, and then followed up by knight f6. We will just simply we play bishop c4 here. We will simply take, and after he takes, castle, and again enjoy a good development and more control of the center. So the last option for black is to go d5, d4, and while this is tempting, after knight e2, and let's say even c5, we can still keep putting more pressure on this pawn until it gets taken, and he can't play e5 because of takes. And let's say knight e6 trying to prepare e5, we can take, and queen a4 solves all our problems, pinning this knight to the king, as well as attacking this pawn. He can play e4 again because this knight is pinned, and we will usually win this pawn and be better throughout the game. So the main thing to remember in the 2 Nec Con is that there's not much theory, thankfully, and we will just simply enjoy. We will usually enjoy a better development, while black will sometimes enjoy a solid position, and we will usually have more control of the center, and we'll have a great game. Now we have come to all the side defenses, like d6, g6, b6, knight f6, and knight c6. We will begin with Alekhine defense, knight f6. We'll play e5 here, attacking this knight. And now knight d5 is the move. d4. And now black usually plays d6 here. The main line is c4 here. Sorry, saying c4, knight b6, and f4. But that has a lot of theory, and your opponent, if he plays Alekhine's defense, is usually more accustomed to the positions rising out of it. I think the better option for us is just take this pawn. I think he usually takes back with the c pawn. And we'll play c6, go for a very easy setup with bishop, knight f6, knight f3, bishop d3, bishop e3, and knight d2. And it's a very easy setup to do, and it's going to give us a very solid position and a great game. So after knight f6, we'll look at the other knight move, knight c6, which is the Nimzowitsch variation. I'll play e5, and this is known as the Nimzowitsch variation decline. Now, black either transposes with e5 here, or he plays d6. d5 is also a move, but this usually transposes to Scandinavian type positions, which we'll look at later. So after d6, we control the center with d4. Knight f6 is his main move. If knight c6, e5, this will transpose to an Italian game without bishop c4 yet, and bishop c4 will just simply transpose it to a position we are already accustomed with. So after d4, knight f6 is his other move, attacking this pawn. Knight c3. Now bishop g4, and now there's a very interesting line that allows us to keep a nice advantage, but at the same time, simplify things down and take your opponent out of his. I don't know. Maybe he has prepared this line or something. So we'll play d5. Then if knight b8, we simply are much better. I'll talk about that after. Knight e5. Now we'll do that famous queen sack, and but it's not. We'll just regain the material after bishop takes d1. Bishop b5 check. c6, and now we take this pawn. He will take our knight and go c7 check because it's a discovered check here. Queen d7, queen d7, and now bishop takes d7. King takes d7. c8 equals queen, and you can promote it to anything you want. And just remember here, if your opponent misclicks taking this queen and then goes queen d6, you have made it with knight b5 check, but your opponent's probably not going to play this. It's going to take, we can take, and now neither of our kings can castle, but black's pawns are doubled, and that can be slightly more useful for us in an endgame. And we'll just play f3, protecting this pawn. Bishop e3, our king can stay in the center, there's no queens on the board, and we'll have a nice endgame. And back here, if the knight goes back to b8, we are better here because this, of course, he just undeveloped a piece and we have more central control. We can play h3. If his bishop goes back to h4 instead of taking, if he does take, we just develop our queen. G4, bishop g6, and now we have a very nice position with this bishop having no squares to go to, and we can play bishop e3, bishop d3, queen d2, castle queenside, and have a very similar position to those we have seen before. So that was a Nimzowitsch defense. Now we'll look at the modern Pyrrhic and the St. George's defense, all of which have the same setup. Again, so let's say he plays the Pyrrhic, d4, g6, let's say. Now we'll play f4 here, which is important. Now we get all the space, and because the queen hasn't been, the e-pawn hasn't been pushed yet, you can queen h4 checks aren't available. Say knight d, let's say knight f6. Let me defend our pawn. Knight d7, knight f3, and we enjoy a nice space. And our bishop's usually going to go to e2, e3, and queen d2, castle queenside. And as I've said, we are going to prepare for a pawn storm, and we'll have a very interesting and fun game. And just one thing to be aware of in the Owen's events with b6 after d4, bishop b7. Just remember to defend this pawn with knight c3, and simply let's say he plays e6 at this point. If he does play e6, then f4 does not work because the queen can come in and penetrate us with checks. And while we could play g3, it just puts us in a somewhat uncomfortable position that your opponent might be accustomed with. So thus, if he plays e6, we simply just go for this very nice setup with two pawns in the center, maybe bishop c4, bishop e3, castle queen d2, and we can castle either side. So, sorry, I forgot about one variation, and it's probably the most annoying response for me when I'm an e4 player, is to play the Scandinavian defense, because the reason it's annoying is that you know you're better here, because black brings out his queen in early and it falls behind in development. But unless you memorize all this theory, it's somewhat hard to punish it. But I think we will just use that extra development to get a nice position. So we will take this pawn, queen takes, and instead of the conventional knight c3, we'll play knight f3 instead. Let's say he plays knight f6, we can play d4, let's say bishop f4, c3, and have this very nice center, solid center. Play your bishop to e3, e2, knight d2, castle kingside, and it's a very solid setup. We will have nice development and ideas like maybe even bishop c4 after knight d2, and we'll kick the queen around later on. And as I've said, when you play very solidly like this and develop all your pieces to natural squares, you will have a great game. So I think I've covered all the major responses. If you guys feel like I missed a line, please put it in the comments below. I now realize sometimes I covered a few lines too fast or covered them out of order. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully hopefully I'll try to do better next time. But I hope you got an equal repertoire out of this. You can go and immediately use. And as I said, I tried not to bog you down with theory. And if you did enjoy the video, please consider to subscribing to support the channel. And I'll come out with a Destroy with D4 video in a week or two. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye.